Thanks everyone for joining us today and welcome to BRIC's Pre-Apprenticeship Speaker Series, where we aim to give you an inside look at the various careers across entertainment, gaming, media, and tech with help from the industry pros themselves. My name is Sarah. I'm BRIC's Director of Communications and your moderator for this series. And today we're talking all about marketing careers in the entertainment space. And we're joined by our very special guest here, Matt Bravmann, who is an entertainment and impact marketing executive. And today, Matt will tell you more about his background as a marketing veteran of 15 years in the entertainment space and give you an overview of some of those specialized careers within the industry and major components of the biz, like brand and campaign strategy, film and TV title marketing, creative and design, and strategic partnerships. Before we dive in, I do want to remind you that that we will have a live Q&A during the last 15 minutes, but also throughout the session as well. So make sure to use that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions you might have for Matt along the way. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to you, Matt.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks everyone for having me. I'm just going to try to be more entertaining than regular school. So hopefully I will be able to do that. But looking forward to chatting with you guys and here to answer any questions throughout. We can keep this super conversational. So if you guys have any questions, just feel free to bump them in the chat. But I'll start by just giving a quick rundown of my journey, which again is only my journey. I'm sure everyone that you could talk to in this field will have a different one. So don't feel any pressure that you have to follow mine. In fact, I would encourage you not to. There's probably quicker ways to get there. But I was a communications major in college, which is basically code for undecided. And you know, got to study a lot of different things from film to TV to marketing to advertising, basically anything in the kind of media and communication space. And most folks that end up in marketing usually come from either like communications, marketing, or advertising backgrounds. But what I was most interested was being an artist. I was a musician, so I'm a piano player. I still play a lot, but I was in a band. I worked for a jingle company. I recorded my own album. I did a lot of music performance stuff in college as well. I played at a coffee house every week. So when I graduated, that's really what I was interested in doing. And I got a job at a jingle company back when those were still a thing, to kind of pay the rent. I was doing session work. So I was doing that for a while and I loved it. And then I just really kind of decided that I needed to eat dinner more consistently. So I figured what would be a career that had some parallels to the strengths that I felt like I had, which music was just one of the outlets to be able to show that. And that was just kind of like creativity, writing, coming up with cool ideas, strategy as well. Um, and I got a job at a creative agency back in New York when I used to live there, which basically a marketing agency that specialized in film and TV. So they did the marketing campaigns for feature films and TV series. And they were just starting out. This was back in 2014, so it was about 11 years ago. They were like, I think 7 or 8 people when I joined. So they were just like a little kind of mom and pop shop. Um, and I came in to basically lead their strategy wing, which is, we'll talk about some of the different functions in the space later. But that's basically the person that is coming up with the ideas and telling the story about what a campaign will be for a particular film or TV series or whatever the product is. Um, so I ended up spending over 5.5 years there, became their strategy lead ultimately, got to work on hundreds of campaigns for feature films and series. I get a lot of like entry level people that still ask me, I want to get into film and TV marketing or advertising. Like, should I work at a studio? Should I work at an agency? Should I work at a talent agency? And I always say if your goal is actually to get better at the craft of creative marketing and design and strategy, Um, an agency model is the best place to be because particularly in a strategy role, I was responsible for winning all of the new business pitches that came in. So if we didn't win, the lights go out and it's like everybody has to go home. So I'm a big sports fan too, so I actually kind of like really love that pressure of, we want to have fun with it and be creative, but also we have to deliver the best work. We have to deliver the best ideas, the most compelling story, and the clearest, most cohesive messages. So I was really lucky to work with a great team there. We worked on a bunch of Oscar-winning films like Get Out, Green Book, The Shape of Water, other big films like Creed 2, Sicario, which launched Denis Villeneuve into the Dune movies, Call Me by Your Name, which launched Luca Guadagnino, who's now a big director. So kind of like really got a good scope of the different types of films and series. I also got to work on like TV series like Modern Family, documentaries like Making a Murderer. So it's a great like introduction to the industry. So I spent about 5.5 years there, back in New York, which is where I'm from. I then came out to Los Angeles, where I am now, to lead up marketing at the Hollywood Reporter, which is a little bit of a different lens, where I was working with a lot of the same clients, but from a publishing point of view. And for those of you guys that don't know, they're an entertainment publication and magazine. So I got to work on a lot of great campaigns there. I was there for when Apple TV launched their streaming service, and we did, a custom podcast as well as a kickoff event. We did a custom docu-series with Amazon Studios, which was the first one ever for the Oscar cycle for a movie with Nicole Kidman. But my favorite thing that I did there was I launched the social impact vertical, which we'll come back to later because that's much closer to what I do now. But that's basically thinking about how we can use the platform of culture, media, arts, and entertainment for social good. How can we bring in kind of cause-oriented messaging to the cultural space? And that's something they hadn't really done before, and I felt like it was a big priority. It would not only be, the right thing to do, but good for business as well. So a couple of examples of that are one is called was called Pictures for the Planet, and that's just like a quick case study I can run through. So that was a program where it was, there were a lot of folks thinking about how can we get an environmental message into entertainment. And nobody in the publishing space had really done anything like that before. And, one thing I really sort of prided myself on was not to fall into a trap of just bringing on like another sponsored campaign. And for those of you guys that don't know, what happens there is big companies like a big bank or a big Amazon or something like that will just pay a bunch of money to basically sponsor a event or panel or talk, and it's basically just pretty hollow, right? It's kind of like they just want the reputation of being associated with a good cause, but it's not actually helping that cause. So I wanted to think of a way where, yes, it has to make money through a partner or a sponsor, but also like, is it actually helping the environment? Because too many times, like I'd been to events like that and I would walk away and it would be like an open bar in Beverly Hills. And it's kind of like, this isn't making the planet cooler? So how can we do this in a way that actually comes out with some tangible results and some tangible takeaways? So what we did in that campaign was we launched the sustainability issue, which is now an annual issue that the Hollywood Reporter publishes that kind of brings together those worlds of sustainability, climate, and culture. It's a huge resource now that is released in tandem with major events like LA Climate Week or the Hollywood Climate Summit. And it's a huge platform for folks to speak out, make partnerships and collaboration. So proud of what that became. We also did a film festival where we showed a series of eco-friendly film, TV, and documentary titles. And we launched an event with the Environmental Media Association called the Impact Summit, where we could kind of bring the thought leaders in the space together to really discuss solutions moving forward. And got some great guests there, including Fran Drescher, who became the head of the Actors Guild and was a major player during the strikes last year. So that's just one example. We also did a program called Women in Entertainment, which was an annual event that culminated a mentorship program, which is, very relevant to you guys, where high school students, high school girls from underserved communities around Los Angeles would get paired with successful female entertainment executives, and they would have mentoring sessions throughout the year. That would culminate with an event at the end of the year where those students would get surprised with college scholarships. And usually it would be big celebrities that would come on and deliver the surprise. So one year we had the whole cast of Black Panther come and give the surprise. Another year we had Gal Gadot, who's Wonder Woman. And that's now also an annual tradition. That event at the end of the year. I launched an event called Raising Our Voices, which was one of the first to bring in the conversation around equity and inclusion into the entertainment space. So it was basically a forum for underrepresented actors, directors, producers, all sorts of creative talent to be featured. We also did an event called United in Pride with Outfest and Film Independent, which was early in COVID. So it was one of the first like digital film festivals spotlighting emerging LGBT filmmakers. So really most proud of my time there of sort of the impact stuff that I did. I then went on to Paramount and worked in senior leadership on their brand marketing team and also oversaw all their awards campaigns. So that's like Oscars, Emmys, all those types of awards. If any of you are driving around LA and you see FYC or for your consideration billboards, those are teams at Paramount and Netflix and Warner Brothers like taking out those ads so their titles can win awards. But I spent a little bit of time there, but like I mentioned, was really most interested in the social impact space. So I came back to that and decided to actually launch my own agency that specialized at that intersection that I was talking about of entertainment and social impact, which was really inspired not only by my own personal growth, but some of the work that I had done at Hollywood Reporter. So I've been doing that for coming up on 2 years. I've been really lucky to work on a lot of great campaigns across the space. Some examples were I led the campaign for a prison reform documentary called The 50, which is would recommend you guys all watch it. It's on demand. It's all about an experimental mental health program that they introduced in California state prisons to combat recidivism. And people that went through the program experienced incredible results of anti-recidivism, where the national average is around 70%. Folks that went through this program, it's about 1%. So for that, we launched 15 different nonprofit partnerships, everyone from dream.org to Imagine Justice to USC. We had a great social campaign, and actually without any money or any budget that we put into the campaign, we finished number 6 on Apple's documentary chart, which was a great achievement because it's such a great film. And we were going up against major documentaries from Netflix and Apple that are putting millions of dollars into their campaign. So really proud of that film and that campaign. I also did an art installation at the Democratic National Convention last year called Into Action, which was all about rallying, galvanizing marginalized voters. I did an art exhibit with the Nature Conservancy. I launched a new nonprofit startup called World Within, which combines impact investing and filmmaking. I also secured a distribution deal with them for a new podcast and got some screenings for a docuseries. I've worked with a lot of folks in the environmental space like World Wildlife Fund, Sierra Club, LA Climate Week. So it's been a great experience, kind of like pivoting a little bit, but also sticking with the sort of same core entertainment marketing background and foundation that I've had. So that's just kind of my career journey in a nutshell. In terms of skills, I would say before getting into like the specific skills of the field, really the most important thing to take away from this is like, I'm sure people have told you before, like do what you love, which is kind of a cliche. And it's like, what does that mean? And it takes some time to know yourself well enough. And it also evolves as you get older, as you have seen with me. But for me, at least, like it's really important to find something that you personally are motivated about. Because if you're doing something like I'm sure everyone has classes at school they really like and connect to, and then others you're just kind of doing because you have to do. Once you get to become an adult, you really want to focus on the stuff that you love. You no longer have to do stuff that other people are just telling you to do. So try different stuff out, but try to find something that really speaks to you personally because that's the best way to find success. If you're not really truly motivated individually, it's really hard to find the energy to um, to be successful in whatever career you're doing. So for me, I found that kind of parallel of the intersection of creativity and strategy. That's really where I succeed and where I excel. Though there are many careers within entertainment marketing that are much more like analytical, for example, which is not one of my strengths. So you don't have to have my exact set of skills. It just needs to be something that you personally relate to and brings out your strengths and what you love. As you start to work in the field longer, another critical skill is collaboration. So, really, the ability to work well with others, particularly at the bigger studios and organizations, becomes kind of really the primary skill because it's like such big teams, and being able to successfully collaborate, be a leader, work well with others is really pretty critical. Um, so yeah, I can like pause there for a sec, Sarah. I don't know if there's any questions right now. Otherwise, I can keep rolling.
No questions so far,
Okay,
but
cool.
really love hearing about your journey, about how you've found, your passion and molded your career to it. Really cool stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'll just run down some other kind of, I would think like maybe common questions in the space is first is like what does a career look like in media and entertainment? So I would say right now that's kind of rapidly changing. I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about some of the issues that Hollywood and the entertainment industry is having. You saw the strikes over the last few years. You've seen a lot of consolidation of big studios kind of merging with each other. So the typical model is you can work at a big studio or content producer like a Paramount where I was at, a Netflix, a Warner Brothers, an Apple, something like that. You can work at a publisher like Hollywood Reporter where I was, or Variety, Deadline, Entertainment Weekly, something like that. You can work at a talent agency, kind of like CAA, UTA, something like that. And those are basically big agencies that represent the talent themselves. So they're trying to get the best roles, opportunities, brand deals, all those things for individual creative people. Or a marketing agency like Brigade, where I was at. And those are the folks that actually run the campaigns. But I will say that within this rapidly changing landscape, there's a lot of room for innovation. There's a lot of types of startups, particularly within the AI space, where there's a lot of people coming at content creation from a totally different angle. So there's a huge opportunity to kind of break out of that traditional mold of, oh, these are the standard you know, job opportunities. And, think about for those of you with entrepreneurial spirits, is there, a new business model or a new something that you want to see out there? Go try it for yourself. There's a great quote by a filmmaker that is, if you want to be a filmmaker, the only thing you have to do is go make films. So don't worry about where they're going to go, what festivals they're going to get into. If you're going to be rich and famous one day, just go make films. So if you really love the entertainment industry, try stuff out, make your own films, make your own music, volunteer to help up and coming musical artists or filmmakers to get their films out there, submit their films to festivals. That's the best thing you can do. So within those spaces, like what are the types of jobs? There's kind of the strategy roles. That's where I came from. Those are the that department is usually the people that are really kind of shepherding the ideas and kind of the overall story. So they're kind of the ship captain in a way where they're sort of steering the rest of the team towards a certain direction based on the story that they're trying to tell. From that, you have folks that are much better kind of like face to face with clients. Those are typically like account leaders or client directors. You have project managers, which are like much more organizationally focused. So they're the people that kind of internally make sure the ship doesn't sink and that everybody is on track and is delivering everything on time. For those of you that are more like artistically focused, there are creative directors and designers. So folks that do graphic design or motion design. That was honestly always the career I wish I could do. Unfortunately, I have no visual artistic talent whatsoever. But if I could, design stuff and make logos and edit videos and stuff, I always thought that was really awesome. And I've been really fortunate to work with a lot of great creative designers and directors over my career. And then there's folks that are like more analytical, like I mentioned, that oversee, media budgets and kind of the more business numbers side of things. So again, it's just figuring out sort of where you fit and what your strengths are, what really speaks to you, and what you love to do. The career ladder is another question that usually comes up. So typically within entertainment marketing, you would start out as an intern in college. You would then get kind of like an entry level job as either an assistant or a coordinator. You would move up to like a manager, a director, a VP, and then ultimately to the C-suite if that's where you want to go, like a CEO or a CMO. And just to distill this, to break it down, what you're really doing is you're taking a creative project, whether it's a film, a TV show, a music album, a musical artist, a Broadway play, a book, a sports team, whatever that is, and you're making sure people know about it. So sometimes, like within business and industry, it gets like way too complicated. There's a lot of buzzwords they're throwing at you. There's a lot of, these like tactics and like seemingly very complex things. And, there are more complex things, as you get more experience that you want to think about. But at its core, think about it from a common sense perspective. It's like, hey, my friend made a movie. How do we get people to know about it? We should probably post it on Instagram and YouTube, right? We should probably maybe we could pass out flyers. Maybe we could put up a billboard. And obviously, those things depend on how much money you have, like who your audience is, all those types of things. But um, I always approached the job from a very sort of like common sense perspective of like, pretend I know nothing about the industry. Like, what's just the best way to get people to know about this? And that's ultimately what you're trying to do because it's such a competitive, crowded landscape. Your job is to break through all the noise. As you know, if you scroll on Instagram, you're distracted with 30 million different things or TikTok. So, how do you make something that is going to be compelling enough for people to actually stop their scroll and pay attention? And the last thing that comes up is, what's a day in the life like? I mentioned earlier, it's really mostly about how you work well with others as you kind of continue to advance in your career, because particularly the bigger organizations, there's a lot of different teams. I mean, I mentioned some of the different types of jobs between strategy and account leadership and project management and creative and media and all that types of stuff. Like all those folks have to work together. And when you're working on like a big feature film, a lot of times there's not only all those internal teams that have to work together, but then they have like up to 5 different agencies that are working on it as well. So there could be a media agency and an awards agency and a publicity agency and an outdoors agency and all those types of things. So it's really making sure that everyone is coming together, and there's not too many cooks to ruin the meal, basically. And obviously continuing to, do what you do well and do your job at making sure, facilitating good interactions between everyone. Um, so those are kind of like the main things about, my journey and just like general thoughts and musings on the career, on this career path. I would just close by saying like, again, the do what you love advice is kind of like overused. And I know like for younger people like me, it was hard to know what to actually do with that. And as I mentioned, like I started out as a musician. I was actually a sportscaster before that in college. That's what I thought I wanted to do. And then I pivoted to being a musician and then went into marketing and I'm also like an entrepreneur now. So it's like I've been through a definitely like a zigzag journey. So don't feel kind of like the pressure that you have to kind of live up to a certain societal expectation of like doing this job or doing only one thing or figuring it all out by a certain age. I would just say, try different stuff out, see what speaks to you, see what you connect with, see what brings you joy, see where your strengths are. And if marketing is something that like you think you might be interested in, the main piece of advice is about immersing yourself in that world. So back when I was a musician, I had a piano teacher that said, if you really want to get good at jazz, you have to listen to jazz all the time. It's the listening that gets you immersed in that world, and that gives you this sort of like deeper intuition about how to get better at it. So if you're interested in marketing, make sure you're like looking out for marketing campaigns. Look at the movies that are coming out this week or the TV series that are coming out this week and go to their Instagram pages and see what they're doing, see what their campaigns are, see how they're advertising. And that'll get you to learn about, sort of like the standard practices, and it'll give you like a foundation to start to think of your own ideas and how you can execute your own campaign. And it'll put you in a great position to really be successful in the field. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got, but happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt. I know we got a question in the chat from Yang, and apologies if I mispronounce your name, who said it must have been a while since you've been an assistant, but I'd be interested in what you think makes a good assistant. As we know, that's one of the common entry-level roles in marketing. So would love to have your insight on that, Matt.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll give you a quote that when I was an intern in college at ESPN, if you guys know the sports network, and I remember on my first day I had someone super high up tell me I was in the copy room making copies, and he told me like if I have one piece of advice for you right now, and that's like when someone tells you to make copies, like make the blank out of those copies. So think about like really small tasks, seemingly like menial tasks, like making a copy, grabbing coffee, sending an email, right? Like proofreading a document. Like put the attention to detail into that as though it's like the most important task in the world. That's the type of thing that's going to make you stand out and succeed as like an assistant, an intern, a coordinator, something like that. Is what they really need from you is someone that they can completely trust and rely on. So nothing will fall through the cracks. They know even if it's a small task they're giving you, you're going to do it, 110%. So just having that focus and that dedication to do even small things really well, that would be my advice for folks just starting out.
That's great advice. I'm wondering because a lot of entry level job descriptions you might see might require experience, but as someone who is fresh, to having any professional experience, are there any projects or things that you'd recommend students get a jump start on to help kind of build up their own personal portfolio?
Yeah, it's a great question. I touched on this a little bit, but there are tons of opportunities to volunteer if this is something you really love to do. That could be, passing out flyers on the street for a festival, right? Like a music festival. There's a lot of festivals that like just want, student volunteers to help them run the festival at like on site. If you're more interested in music, on the film side, if you have kind of like I mentioned, if you have any friends that are filmmakers or musical artists, help them launch an Instagram and try to get an audience for them and see what you can do. And if you can say like, "Hey, I launched this artist Instagram from scratch and I took it from 0 to 1,000 followers," that's awesome. That's a huge accomplishment. There's a lot of people professionally that can't do that. So you're already like way ahead of the game if you can do something like that. So just think about your own personal network. If you're an artist yourself, right? Like don't feel like you have to, um, you know, tamper that down or anything. Record your own stuff and try to get it out there. Post flyers around your neighborhood. You know what I mean? You can also host an event. I know a bunch of people back in my New York days that were really great kind of community builders, and the fact that they could bring people together for these events. That's marketing, right? Like those are platforms that are bringing people together. that are now an opportunity to showcase something, whatever that might be. So wherever like you feel comfortable, there's a ton of opportunities to volunteer, again, festivals, individual events, individual artists. Those are the types of things that really give you very tangible highlights and bullet points that people will look for of like, oh, this person is really has a genuine interest in this and has shown that they can be successful.
Great. And I think that actually relates to another question we got in the Q&A from someone anonymously who asked, what are you looking for in a marketing intern, especially in a creative industry? What should be in their portfolio and what level of experience is expected at that level?
Yeah, great question. So some crossover to the assistant question. I would say it depends a little bit on an intern of where you're trying to intern. So if it's at like an agency, for example, versus a studio, I would say it's not necessarily required to have experience, but given how kind of competitive and interested, particularly young people are in entertainment and the creative industries, you always want things that can help you stand out. So just going back to what I was just saying, I would always recommend showing, you have to show them at least that you have demonstrated some level of commitment to this. So if your kind of resume shows just random stuff, like I worked at the mall with nothing that shows them that why would this person, like, why is this person going to be like someone that we can cultivate and develop? Unless you have like an amazing personality, which I'm sure many of you do, it always helps to have that experience just because to show them that you have a real personal interest in this. And back to what I said, the people that are most successful in things are the people that have the strongest personal motivation. They are self-driven because they really love what they're working on. So the more you can show that you have that, and that you have that commitment and that you have decided to volunteer your time, help up and coming artists, you're dedicated to the space, that's going to put you in the best position to get an internship. And a lot of that stuff could be through your school potentially, whether that's college or, even if it's just like classes that you're taking. Something related to like media, entertainment, communication, stuff like that can also show, I'm working on this, I'm studying this, I'm interested in this. You could also even, I've told this to people before, if you are light on like actual experience, just put together a portfolio of campaigns that you really like. So what I mentioned was like you could go and look at the movies that are coming out this weekend and do that for, a month or two and just put together a couple of PowerPoint slides or Google slides of like, hey, I really love the Dune campaign. Here's why. I love their billboards. I love their Instagram posts. Even that would be a really cool kind of like slideshow spotlight for potential hiring managers to say, wow, this person really cares about this industry. They're really monitoring it closely. They're looking at campaigns that are cool. That could be something that could stand out as well, in addition to any potential professional experience.
Love that. Great advice. And we have another question, this time from Minnie. We've talked about some technical skills like knowing social media. We talked about PowerPoint, making slide presentations just now. Minnie asks, what are some technical skills that someone trying to break into marketing should have? And also, what are some entertainment marketing campaigns that you think are good, Matt?
Yeah, two great questions. In terms of technical skills, I mean, again, it kind of depends the specific job you have in marketing. So, like, again, some of those more analytical media jobs, like you're going to need to know how to use spreadsheets and Microsoft Excel and things like that. The more creative jobs, again, it's more kind of like slide presentations. You don't necessarily have to be a designer yourself, but being fluent in the design language, like understanding, what certain terms mean, when to make things motion versus graphics, things like that. But like typically, there's kind of a joke that like marketing and comms jobs like actually don't require a ton of technical skills, which is one of the reasons that I can do this because I don't have a lot of technical skills. Like, a lot of other jobs you need like an advanced degree if you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, the list goes on. there's very sort of specialized training for a very specific skill. Marketing is typically, uh, or at least largely, sort of a little bit more of a generalist path where there's kind of like a bit of a kind of, I don't know, a common sense factor to it. For me, at least, I don't want to speak for other people. For me, at least, it was very sort of like a natural fit based on what my natural strengths were, as opposed to, developing this very specialized skill. That being said, the longer you're in the field, the more that kind of specific skill of what you do, whether it's strategy, account management, design, whatever that is, the more that gets honed and the more that gets developed. So there's a lot of different things, depending on where you go, that you can hone. In terms of campaigns that I love, I actually have a newsletter that I send out to a couple thousand people for my agency, that every couple months, that recaps my favorite campaigns. At Paramount, I actually oversaw all of our marketing awards. So this is one area that I pay very close attention to. So we could do a whole nother hour on campaigns that I loved. Just from the past week, if you guys have saw, the NBA is back on NBC, where it used to be in the 1990s. So they did a really cool campaign where they had 30 basketballs, one for each team in the league, that they put outside 30 Rock, which is their kind of headquarters in New York. So they called it 30 Rocks, right outside 30 Rock. So that was a cool campaign just to kind of commemorate the series coming back. I have a ton of campaigns that I've worked on that I'm proud of. Way back in the day, I put Morgan Freeman on the Waze app. His voice was like, gave people driving directions, and he was like one of the first people to do that. So that was a campaign that got a lot of press. For one of the Creed movies, I worked with the Jordan brand and Nike to do a training experience with Michael B. Jordan, where he went around to different boxing gyms throughout the country and gave kind of training classes to how to fight like Creed. So yeah, I could do a whole like term paper on different campaigns that I've loved, but that's a great question, and also a question that you might get in one of your interviews, by the way. So make sure, if you are applying to a job, whether it's an internship, an assistant, a coordinator, whatever it is, a very common question, and one that I've asked to people that I've hired before, is what are some campaigns that you've really liked, or campaigns that you really haven't liked? And that just, again, shows that you're paying attention and that you're aware of the landscape, because that's really important to have that knowledge if you're gonna execute campaigns of your own.
That's a great build and a very common question that I can definitely echo as someone who also comes from a marketing communications background as well. Love that. We've talked a little bit about, Matt, your career journey, working in studio, working with other agencies, now owning your own agency as well, our own company. Are you able to explain to our audience, what are kind of the differences of working in those different environments as a
Yeah,
marketing person?
great question. So mainly there's sort of like the two options. Typically, the main two options in this space are, you're sort of in-house, and that's like a full-time role, full-time job with with an organization, or you're sort of a contractor, which is kind of how I work with. I also like hire full teams, as I operate as an agency as well. And there's pros and cons to both. Again, I was on the kind of in-house full-time road track for 15 years before I, decided to try going out on my own. The pros of being in-house are obviously stability and security, right? So like, you have a very consistent paycheck coming in. You have kind of like a team you're working with consistently. I would say, particularly early in your career, I would definitely recommend getting some experience on the in-house side first. You see it sometimes with like designers and creative directors more so, but if you're like a real marketing person, it's difficult to go out on your own until you have amassed some experience and some connections, because without a strong resume and experience to point to, it's just hard to get a lot of gigs and a lot of clients. Um, so you do get, you get some critical skills and experience of, working with teams. Like a lot of the stuff that I was just talking about, I wouldn't have known any of that stuff if I, had went straight into freelance. I had to learn all of those things working in-house at these companies for a long time. But then on the freelance side, so again, it's a lot more unpredictable. So you have to be comfortable with like a little bit of uncertainty around like where your next project's going to come from. There's also like a large kind of selling component where you kind of constantly have to be networking with people, reaching out to people, making sure you're staying on people's radars. Like I mentioned, I have a newsletter that I send out every couple of months. I also do a lot of outreach to people. So that's something you don't have to do on the in-house side because you're within a company, so you don't need to be sort of like selling yourself in that way. But the pro to being, freelance contract, whatever you want to call it, is you have some more agency over the projects that you work on. So you can be kind of much more intentional about, who you want to work with, what types of work you want to do, the sectors you want to focus on, and the types of work you want to focus on. So I would say definitely pros and cons for both. There's definitely not a better one. It really just depends on where you are, what you want to be doing, what level you are in your career. But I think it's a good experience ultimately if you're in this career for a long time to try both.
Great. We got another question anonymously. Do you have any advice for artists who are trying to advertise themselves, especially when social media is so saturated nowadays?
Yeah, great question. I was in this position, kind of early days of social media, but it was still very, saturated and competitive. Um, Goes back to what I said about that advice from, I think it was Steven Spielberg that said that it was, just the filmmaker, quote, just, just do it. So like there's a lot of like Eastern wisdom, if any of you guys are spiritual, about it's all about the process, not the results. So there's if you're able to disconnect from the amount of followers and the amount of likes and shares and all of that stuff, and you're just doing it for the joy of sharing your art. I was in this exact same position. It's hard for everybody, and a lot of times there's I think for a lot of artists, they feel a little bit uncomfortable about marketing themselves. I certainly did because it was sort of like I don't like I love the process of making it, but I don't want to like sell it. I don't want to like force it on people, all those types of things, and that's very, very common. So I would just say just do your best with it and share it, and just make sure you're putting it out there. At the end of the day, there's a lot of just like luck and timing that's involved in terms of is it something that a lot of people are going to see or like or anything. The only way to know that is A, to try, and B, to go through periods where it doesn't work. Like every successful artist has written bad songs, right? And has actually said that if they didn't write the bad songs, they would never have written good songs. So I know that can be a hard process, but having gone through that specifically as an artist, it was like, it's something I would just encourage you to do and try as best you can to disconnect from the results and focus on the process.
Great. This next question from Minnie, I think is great to hear from your personal experience, Matt. They ask, I'm also interested in working in entertainment for social impact. I'm currently a part of an animation production for environmental issues in the Dutch Caribbean. And I was wondering how the approach to marketing might be different when promoting social change.
Yeah, it's an amazing question. So there's a big difference there's a lot of differences with social change. So I'll just go through a couple of them. So the first is typically in the social impact sector, you're dealing with nonprofit organizations that are, legally and objectively different than, a film studio or publication that they solely exist to make money. If you're a nonprofit, there is a huge need to make money because they have to continue to exist, but they also need to live up to their mission, and like legally they're as it states, they're not making a profit. They're putting all of the money that they get back into their mission. So typically, the way it works is with nonprofits, there's sort of like a public facing kind of consumer aspect to it, which is very similar to how it would be in the entertainment industry. But then there's also sort of like a donor side to it. So they also need to speak not only to people to just be aware of this nonprofit generally, but also specifically to people who are likely to donate to them. And sometimes there's crossover between those two, but not always. A lot of times, particularly with smaller nonprofits, is that they're kind of more reliant on a smaller group of wealthier philanthropists or donors. And a lot of times that money comes from like grants from foundations and things, not even from individuals. So that adds kind of a layer of complexity where you have kind of two different, sometimes messages that you need to work in tandem and has some overlap, but largely separate. And that's very different than, say, if you're marketing a movie where you really just have a consumer message, at least at the start. Sometimes you have some examples where you're doing an awards campaign that's speaking like specifically to voters, for example. But by and large, entertainment marketing is about getting as many people as possible to see, hear, know about your specific project. So there's an extra layer of complexity when it comes to marketing, and then also, thinking about just like the ethics of what your campaign can do. So, for example, I do a lot of work in the environmental space as well, and there are lots of partners who would give a lot of money to some of the environmental nonprofits I work with, but these organizations can't accept it and maintain their integrity basically. So if they were to work with, if there was actually an advertising agency last year that was a B Corp, which, if you guys aren't familiar, is essentially in between a nonprofit and a regular corporation. It's basically, they are for profit, but they need to adhere to certain standards of ethical integrity. And they decided to work with a big oil company. I think it was Shell, and they actually lost their B Corp status because of it. So that's a good example of, if you're going to be in the impact space, you need to be sort of like a little bit more stringent and a little bit more strict about your ethical standards and who you're going to work with, what types of campaigns you're going to work with, as opposed to like a purely for-profit entertainment brand that is really just looking to maximize its reach, maximize its profit as much as possible.
Great. We've also talked about, putting yourself out there as it pertains to social media. We got another anonymous question that asks, are there any networking tips you would suggest? I go to industry events, but don't seem to get contacts and not sure what to do. I'm not a shy person, so any pointers would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a tough question to answer. My only advice here is, like, there are a lot of people that treat networking as like almost like speed dating, where they'll go to a networking event or function and their goal is to like get as many business cards as possible. And I would definitely advise against that. I would rather get one or two sort of meaningful connections as opposed to 100 speed dates, so to speak, because quick interactions with people are very unlikely to turn them into an advocate for you or someone that, might help you in your career and that you might help as well in return, as opposed to taking a more kind of like personal, meaningful approach and establishing an emotional connection with someone, um, similar as you would do, with a friend or someone in your personal network, and treating it with a level of, personality and humanity beyond just like a transactional interaction. So I would say there's no like secret sauce of like, oh, just do this and you'll be a master networker. I would just say always try to treat people like they're people and not just, things you can take advantage of and try to get something out of. And that's a way that you can actually build like meaningful connections that will really advocate for you moving forward, as opposed to just, people you're asking favors from. And then continue to, it sounds like you're already going to events, which is awesome. There's a lot of networking events, particularly around LA, like in creative industries. So keep looking out for those. Volunteering, like we talked about earlier, is another great opportunity to meet people. So even if you're meeting whoever's hiring those people, those are people that are getting paid and that are established professionals. You also meet other folks like kind of your age that are going to start to break into the industry. So I would say continuing to research and look out for networking events, and looking for other volunteer opportunities as well.
All right. I think we've reached the end of our Q&A questions. So unless anyone has any other questions, we can go ahead and wrap up. Matt, I'd love to get maybe the link to your newsletter that you mentioned. If any folks are interested and they want to sign up, would love to make sure that folks have that to do so.
Sure. Yeah, I can definitely send that to you.
Great. All right. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us a very thorough overview of marketing careers in entertainment and some great advice on how folks can direct their own career journeys based on their interests and their strengths. And oh, actually, sorry, hold on. It looks like we got one last question, if you wouldn't mind hanging
Yeah,
on.
of course.
Okay, I'm part of a team that's about to open a production/animation studio. From your experience, what would be a good piece of advice to start finding potential clients in my role as strategic partnerships?
Yeah, so I mean, I think similar to, and by the way, I just put the link to my Substack in the chat if you guys want to sign up for it. If Yeah, so new clients is no different than any brief you would get at an agency. Is the first step is always research. So you can spend a couple hours sort of like exhaustively looking through all the different leads that might be appropriate for you. That could be regional and national, right? So depending on who you're going after with clients, Google, ChatGPT, whatever, start a list. And then once you get more specified, so for example, if it's, um, you know, agencies, if you Google creative agencies Los Angeles, you'll get 10,000 results or whatever. And then, filtering that to see, kind of more specific results. So I recommend putting in the time to do like really thorough, detailed research. That should always be the start of any new partnership venture.
Thank you for answering that last question, Matt. I also reposted the link to Matt's newsletter for anyone who wants to sign up for that. And we'll make sure that it's included in the recording description as well. Thanks so much again, Matt, for joining us today. I do want to remind our audience, like we mentioned about networking events and industry events, for those of you who are attending Lightbox Expo this week, just a reminder, BRIC will have a booth there. We're booth number 1311. So definitely make sure to seek us out for just to say hello or to learn more about our programs, our resources, our events. And if you are interested in learning more about marketing careers with a lens to events in the entertainment space, our next speaker series on November 4th will be covering that topic. So make sure to register for that event if you're interested. All right, well, we'll end it here. Thank you so much again, Matt, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
Thank you.